Today on the newscast, it's a Watchman Year in Review. Our top clips from 2022, the videos you watch the most. That's next. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. Hard to believe that 2022 is now almost over. This is our final newscast, very likely, for the year 2022 as we head into 2023. And what a way to close out this year with Benjamin Netanyahu sworn in yesterday as Israel's prime minister once again as this year comes to a close. Folks, it was a very eventful year, obviously, around the world, as you're about to see in our best of clips, but also here for the Watchman Newscast. Hey, we passed the 500,000 subscriber mark. Hard to believe. And we've been growing steadily since then. We thank God Almighty for expanding our territory, and we thank you, our loyal watchmen and women on the wall, for coming shoulder to shoulder alongside us for such a time as this. We cannot, and I stress, cannot do this without your continued viewership and support. We appreciate you all so much. Hey, good way to close the year if you're a frequent viewer or if you just discovered the Watchman Newscast and you have not yet subscribed, please subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. What happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East, and we want to be your one-stop shop for all things Middle East, everything unfolding right now in the world's most pivotal and chaotic region, and why it matters to you no matter where you live. And if you watch a newscast on a regular basis, you know that, yes, we hit on the Middle East the majority of the time with obviously a huge focus on Israel. I'm in the region frequently. I'm in Israel frequently, as you know from my on-the-ground reports here on the Watchman. But we're also talking China, Russia. We're talking about things unfolding where I'm standing right now in the United States and much more. And of course, we dig into Bible prophecy, biblical history, archaeology, in addition to all the geopolitical and security news coming out of the Middle East and really around the world. We've had several videos that have had hundreds of thousands, in some cases well over 1 million views here on the channel. So what we've done today for the end of the year is compile the 10 most watched clips for the Watchman Newscast for 2022. Now, these are short snippets from those 10 videos. If you want to watch the entire video, we've got the date there for you when they were posted. Just go back and search for it in our archives. There is a treasure trove of information there. Without further ado, here they are, folks. The top 10 clips for the Watchman Newscast for 2022. Take a look. Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps launched at least 12 ballistic missiles at Iraqi Kurdistan. The city of Erbil, which is the capital of Iraqi Kurdistan, was targeted, and the rockets fell very close to the U.S. consulate there. Now, the Revolutionary Guards Corps claimed responsibility, so there is no debate, folks, on who was behind this attack, but they said that the target of this missile onslaught were secret Israeli bases or Israeli Mossad spy centers. Now, over the past few years, Iran has frequently accused Israel of having a presence in Iraqi Kurdistan, and now a new report from Hezbollah-linked media says that Israel is using Kurdistan as a forward base to launch attacks inside Iran. The Times of Israel picked up this report, as did Haaretz, two leading Israeli publications, but the original source was Al Mayadeen, which is a Hezbollah-linked TV station. Al Mayadeen reported that 6 Israeli drones destroyed an Iranian drone fleet in western Iran back in February. Now, again, this Hezbollah-linked TV station said the drones originated from Iraqi Kurdistan, and that is why Iran, according to Hezbollah, this Hezbollah-linked network, that is why Iran targeted Erbil over the weekend. But again, a pretty stunning admission from a Hezbollah, and you would think an Iran-linked TV station, to basically admit, yes, Israel did severe damage to hundreds of Iranian drones at a base in western Iran. Again, this happened back in February, and now the narrative from the Iranian regime and its mouthpieces is that the attack over the weekend, the missile attack, was responding to this takeout of a fleet of Iranian drones by Israel. Both of you have talked about that coming war of Gog and Magog laid out in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38 and 39. Chris, I'll start with you, and Joel, I want to ask your take on it as well. Russia's moves in the Middle East, could there be some prophetic implications to that? The Russian bear here at Israel's doorstep.
Just go to Ezekiel 38 and 39 and see what may happen, the war of Gog and Magog. And so when you see Russia being so emboldened after this Afghanistan debacle and what he can do and how he threatens Europe, not only Europe, but will he come down as to here in the north? We don't know when, and we don't know exactly if this is the scenario, but it looks like things are lining up and these trends are moving forward, just like the Bible says.
Yeah, and Joel, just a reminder for everyone watching, when we talk about this Gog and Magog, this confederation that comes together in the latter days, Ezekiel says, who is part of that confederation that comes against Israel? And by the way, it ends well for Israel. It doesn't end well for this invasion force when God intervenes directly. But name some of the nations. I know you believe Russia will be among those nations that come against Israel in the latter days.
Really, you have to do historical detective work to figure out what these ancient names in Ezekiel are and how they correspond to current nation states. But the short version is Magog is certainly Russia. I don't have any doubts about that. But the next country that's mentioned is Persia. Well, that's the easiest one.
That's the easiest one
of all of them, because until 1935, that was the name of Iran. Gomer is an ancient name for the people that we now call Turkey. So if you just started with those three, you'd have Russia, Iran, and Turkey, the very countries that are occupying Syria, first time in 2,600 years since Ezekiel wrote that. Lebanon is not mentioned in the prophecy as an aggressor. It's not mentioned at all, but the attack, as you said, is coming from the north. Well, with Russia, Iran, and Turkey already occupying and with their military forces already in Syria, then what's going on with Lebanon? Well, it is a wholly owned subsidiary, a province, really, of Iran because of Hezbollah. And you and I have covered this and written about how Hezbollah has just taken over the country. So we could go through more countries, but the main invasion force comes from the north, and a couple things have had to have happened. Ezekiel 36 and 37. Israel has to be reborn as a country. Check. Jews have to be coming back en masse and resettling here. Check. Jews have to have rebuilt the ancient ruins. Check. They have to make Israel, modern Israel, prosperous. Check. And they have to be living securely in the land. The term peace is never used, but the sense that Israelis feel like, okay, yeah, we get it. People hate us. We're Jews. Unfortunately, that's our lot in life. But overall, we feel good. And that's where Israelis feel right now. Most Christians don't have any idea really about this prophecy and how things are really coming together in ways we've never seen ever in history.
And we can now say that unblemished red heifers are on the ground in Israel in 2022. Yes, it really happened late last week when 5 rabbi-approved red heifers arrived at Ben Gurion Airport from Texas. Now, the cows were greeted at the airport by some 300 people and a welcoming ceremony. And if you're not familiar with the law of Moses and Bible prophecy, you might be asking right about now, what's the big deal? Some red cows arrived in Israel. So what? Why should I care? And what's all the fuss about? Well, for starters, the law of Moses says that for someone to become ritually pure for sacrifice, the ashes of an undefiled red heifer are required. Historically, for a Jew to sacrifice in the temple in Jerusalem, this was an absolute must. More on that in a minute. The book of Numbers, chapter 19, verse 2, lays it all out, saying, quote, "This is a requirement of the law that the Lord has commanded. Tell the Israelites to bring you a red heifer without defect or blemish, and that has never been under a yoke." The only problem was that for the past 2,000 years, no such red heifer existed that we know of. Until now. Evangelical Christian farmers in Texas, who are apparently very familiar with Mosaic law and the requirements, donated the heifers, and upon arrival in Israel, the cows were reportedly taken to a farm near Beit Shan, where they're currently under supervision and in a 10-day quarantine. Now, a group called B'nai Israel, I think I'm pronouncing that right, located the cows and helped facilitate this entire operation and get them to Israel. Pretty incredible work by B'nai Israel. Before the cows departed the U.S., a group of rabbis from the Temple Institute in Jerusalem even went to Texas and gave them the thumbs up. 5 red heifers, unblemished, just as the law of Moses requires. A top spokesman at the Kremlin, an aide close to Vladimir Putin, says the Alexander Nevsky Church in the Old City, a few miles behind me, is, quote, at the top of Russia's agenda in its relations with Israel. Now, we reported on yesterday's newscast. If you missed it, check it out right here in our archives. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time we post a new video, perhaps even from here in Jerusalem. But we talked yesterday about the growing tensions between Russia and Israel, and Vladimir Putin sent a letter to Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett recently demanding control over this 19th century church in the Old City of Jerusalem, right next to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's called the Alexander Nevsky Church. It's in a courtyard, and Putin is demanding control over it. Long story short, Israel agreed to hand over control to Russia about 2 years ago under Prime Minister Netanyahu, who was the leader at the time. An Israeli court went back on that decision a little while ago and said, no, we won't hand over control. And now Russia is demanding control. And folks, bet your bottom dollar, the main reason they are doing that is because they are very angry, as we discussed on yesterday's newscast. Again, I encourage you to check it out. We got into the prophetic implications as well, the war of Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 38 and 39. But Russia is doing this clearly and playing up now the Palestinian issue, including Putin's call with Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority leader, earlier this week. They're doing that as a way to strike back at Israel over the Israeli Foreign Ministry's condemnation of Russian war crimes in Ukraine. So now Russia is going to turn around and say, well, you're committing crimes against the Palestinians. That's how this is going to work. And tensions are going to increase. And now this church in Jerusalem has become a flashpoint. Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes, at least against Iranian and Hezbollah assets in Syria over the past decade. But again, rarely will Israel release a statement or make a public comment saying, hey, we did it. This time it's different. Kohavi referenced a strike, a major strike that we reported here on the newscast last month. This went down in early November along the Syria-Iraq border, which is obviously a longer distance for Israeli fighter jets to travel. Much of the Israeli airstrikes center around the Damascus area or more in the western and northern part of Syria. But obviously the Syria-Iraq border is to the far east, the far eastern half of Syria. So again, a further distance for Israeli fighter jets to travel. But nonetheless, Kohavi said today that's exactly what they did in early November. There was a convoy. And again, you may remember this from previous reporting here on the newscast. There was a convoy of some 25 trucks traveling across that border. They were looking to transit fuel and weapons, reportedly, to Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, but they were stopped in their tracks, according to Kohavi. One of the trucks in particular, one of these 25 trucks in this convoy, was carrying weapons, and Kohavi said that due to Israel's, quote, advanced capabilities, they were able to specifically target the exact truck that had the weapons, and they were able to take it out. Now, folks, we saw this coming over the past few weeks. We had more and more defections from this far-flung coalition that Naftali Bennett and Lapid formed last June 2021. Bennett was prime minister for about 1 year, almost exactly to the day. As a power-sharing agreement, he was set to serve as prime minister for, I believe, about 1.5 years, 18 months, and then Lapid would have assumed the mantle as prime minister after that. That no longer appears to be in the cards because Lapid and Bennett have announced that the government is dissolving. They just couldn't keep this coalition together. Too many deflections. And again, folks, it's not a big surprise. From the moment this coalition was formed last year, people were kind of taking bets on when it would eventually collapse because, as I mentioned, it was so far flung. Yair Lapid is I guess you would say, a center-left kind of guy. Naftali Bennett clearly on the right wing of the Israeli political spectrum. There was a variety of ideologies in this coalition, people on the right, in the center, and the far left. There was even an Arab Islamist party with ties to the Muslim Brotherhood as part of this coalition. The one thing that united them, though, was their hostility to the former and perhaps future Prime Minister Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu. Now, none of them like Bibi. It was the anyone but Bibi coalition. That's what I've called it. And now Bibi perhaps is waiting in the wings once again. He is the current leader of the Israeli opposition. And in October, if elections do indeed go down, then a few months from now, again, Lapid, interim kind of caretaker prime minister until then. If the elections happen in October, Bibi has to be considered the favorite. Israel is definitely a right-wing leaning country. Take Tel Aviv out of the mix and that Tel Aviv metro area, and Israel certainly is a right-leaning, conservative-leaning country. Russia, Ukraine, obviously the big story. The all-out onslaught on the Ukrainian capital of Kiev has begun. Casualties are increasing. Russia has encircled Ukraine's capital city, and it may fall by this weekend. The fallout from this Russian invasion will be felt for months and years to come. It is an earth-shaking event, to say the least. On yesterday's newscast, we talked about the aftershocks and how the likes of China and Iran and North Korea may now see an opening to accelerate their plans in the wake of this Russian invasion. But something I've been watching very closely, and I think it's the perfect topic for today's newscast since I am in Israel, I'm in Jerusalem right now, is the Russia-Israel relationship and how Ukraine will now impact that. Over the past few years, Israel has carried out hundreds upon hundreds of airstrikes against Iranian and Hezbollah targets inside Syria. Iran has set up shop in Syria at Israel's doorstep because it wants a forward base to strike against the Jewish state. Picture the situation in southern Lebanon with Hezbollah, Iran's most lethal proxy. Iran wants to duplicate that in Syria and open up a second northern front against Israel. Israel wisely says, no way, this is a non-starter. So the Israel Defense Forces have been working very hard to push Iran and Hezbollah back from the Israel-Syria border and back from the Golan Heights. Russia has also been in Syria while all of this is unfolded, and Russia has stood back and allowed Israel to operate freely against Iran in Syria. Now, Russia entered Syria in 2015 to bail out its good friend and ally, Bashar al-Assad. They succeeded. Assad has essentially prevailed in that bloody Syrian civil war, but Russia is also aligned with Iran and, yes, Hezbollah in Syria. Israel has said, again, we can't allow Iran to set up shop here, and Israel has had a relationship, an understanding of sorts behind the scenes with Vladimir Putin. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had it. The new Prime Minister, relatively new Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, also has it. Both men have traveled to Russia to meet with Putin, and Russia has not stood in the way as Israel has continued to carry out these strikes. But there are signs that may be changing and that Russia perhaps is losing patience with those Israeli strikes. Just 2 weeks ago, a Russian foreign ministry spokesperson called out Israel over its strikes in Syria, called on Israel to cease those strikes, and called them, quote, a crude violation of Syrian sovereignty. A brigadier general by the name of Haidari, who is the head of all Iran's ground forces, this is a major player, again, a brigadier general, made some very troubling comments today. He talked about a new drone called the Arash-2, apparently a new Iranian-produced suicide drone. Now, this new Arash-2 long-range drone, Brigadier General Haidari boasted about today, and he said that it is specifically designed to target two cities, Israel's second and third largest cities on the Mediterranean coast, Tel Aviv and Haifa. Thankfully, Israel, of course, has that Iron Dome missile defense system. They're also developing that Iron Beam laser defense system to combat, in particular, the drone threat and, of course, the rockets, the missiles. Where do you think the Russia-Israel relationship is headed? Do you think there could be some rough waters ahead?
I think diplomatically, yes. I think we're already on the verge of that. Look, Russia doesn't see Israel as a friend, but not necessarily as an automatic adversary. Okay, we're not in the Soviet period anymore. Okay, Putin is acting cold, calculated, strategic, not ideological. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Having said that, Israel is clearly an ally, or even more, a friend of the United States. And that puts us in a position to be the great spoiler for the Russians. Now remember, the Russians have naval and air presence in Syria, not because of Syria, because of the Mediterranean. In other words, they're there because it provides them with bases on the Eastern Mediterranean. We are, and have always been, considered America's unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Eastern Mediterranean. And the Russians know it, and they've known it for decades, going back to the Cold War. So we're a bone in their throat as far as that's concerned, especially, and here, take a scenario. America has X number of carrier task forces at sea, much more than the Russians could handle on a global basis. But a little bit of mischief in the Pacific, a little bit of mischief in the Persian Gulf. They pull a carrier out of the Mediterranean. All of a sudden, Russia is on a par in that specific part of the world.
The only place they could escape would be through the waters. And right at this location, amazingly, there appears to be an underwater land path. So if the waters were parted, they would need somewhere to walk to. And here, just at this location, there happens to be that underwater land path. So if the waters were parted, they could walk from Egypt through the waters of the Gulf of Aqaba into northwestern Saudi Arabia, into the area that the local Saudis call the land of Jethro. By this underwater land path going from Egypt's Nuweiba beach into northwestern Saudi Arabia, there are very interesting coral anomalies that look like the remains of chariots, specifically chariot wheels. And there have been metal detectors brought down by divers that detected circular patterns of metal within the coral.
Wow, it was quite a year. Folks, just going through and reviewing those clips and watching them once again, it reminded me of everything that went down in 2022, how the prophetic chess pieces continue to move on the board as things are quickening, right? In these Bible times, these tumultuous but Bible times, prophetic times that we are living in right now. Hey, fasten your seatbelts for 2023. We are very glad and very honored that you will be with us here as we walk through this together and we walk with the Lord together in the year to come. I wish everyone, again, number one, thank you from the bottom of my heart for the entire Watchman team for joining us in 2022. And I wish all of you a very happy new year, a blessed, a prosperous 2023 to you and your families and your loved ones. Hey, until next year, thanks so much for joining us here in the Watchman Newscast. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.